Hello, interwebs. I hope you're doing well. Today, I have a very special video and interview for all of you. As many of you know, I am a huge Star Trek novel fan, and I love talking about Star Trek novels on this channel. And so the most recent Star Trek novel that got released was a little book called Star Trek Deep Space Nine Revenant, a Star Trek book focusing on the character of Jadzia Dax, which, as many of you know, one of my favorite characters, not the least of which because she's awesome and badass and wonderful, but because she is also a wonderful way that I discovered my own transness and ideas with gender, my relationship to gender. So
All
to see,
right.
yes,
Good
I
company.
exactly. So adore her character. So when I saw that this book was coming out, I was very excited, and I was even more excited to learn who was writing it. Wonderful person named Alex White, who is a non-binary and trans author who I have with me today to talk about the novel. So thank you so much, Alex, for joining me to talk about this book. I'm very, very excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. It's funny that you bring up that I'm sort of trans and non-binary. I mean, obviously, but
That's how we define you solely. There's no other personality traits you have. That's it.
yeah, when they went to announce the book for press, they were like, the first trans or non-binary author to write for Star Trek, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh my God, am I trans? I guess I am. you know
Yeah.
but am I, and I was like suddenly worried, like, what if Charlie Jane Anders writes a Star Trek novel? Like, what am I gonna do? Because, like, obviously, like, I I can go in the closet pretty hard, right? Like, I can wear the polo shirt with the best of them,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
though you are rocking the polo shirt quite nicely, I
I
recognize that Raiju the Kaiju polo shirt.
Yes, yes. I'm actually friends with them. We actually like literally just had lunch the other day. So
Oh,
love
fantastic!
them.
I'm a
Yeah,
big fan, big
yeah.
fan.
They make amazing stuff. So
What a
yeah.
crossover.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. Sorry, this is an aside, but like it's one of those weird things where the trans online community and nerd community is so small. Where this Christmas, a friend of mine gave me a gift from a transgender Etsy creator, and
Mm.
the transgender Etsy creator knew my YouTube channel and left a note. And it's like, this is from your friend, but also this is a thank you from me as well. And I'm like, it's too
Oh.
small. It's too small, and I love it, but it's wonderful. It's just funny.
That is so funny. Yes, the world is definitely a tiny place.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel really bad for the publicity person because I was like, I don't know if I want to go by that. I don't know if that seems like stealing somebody else's thunder. And I ended up having a lot of conversations with friends about it and kind of coming around to that. But of
Hmm.
course, we're months after the press release. And so I had this poor PR person like correct this thing and like switch it to trans or non-binary. And and now I'm like, well, I'm really glad that we had that or in there so we can just go ahead and make it an and,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but I'm sorry, Julia, that I hadn't thought about that before.
It's
It's
interesting. It's interesting because like I saw something similar happen with the characters in Star Trek Discovery, because when they announced that the characters played by Ian Alexander and Bluto Barrio on that show, they announced like a non-binary and a trans character. And
Mhm.
for me, this is not to define for anyone else or for you, but I've always seen like non-binary as like a sort of part of the umbrella of trans, whereas like
Mhm.
trans is like anyone who identifies separate from how they identified at birth, and then non-binary, just because we don't identify anyone as non-binary at birth, we sort of, it's like, oh, that means that like they're automatically trans. But then I also saw people's like, no, 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 I don't see it that way, which is totally legitimate. I just was like, oh, that's an interesting like distinction and way sort of like people conceptualize it.
It's funny because, like, for me, part of how it got easier for me to deal with, I think, was that I realized that I'm not so, like, for instance, I always hated the idea of like androgyny as asexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that that's not really fair, and I love that people like Bowie and Prince exist to show us that no, they're very fuckable.
Very,
Like,
very much so. Very much
yes.
so.
And so, for me, I was like, well, that means it's possible to sort of be a lot of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the non-binariness is more like I'm a lot of both.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
And that's how I became more comfortable with the transness, is because, at that point I was like, you know what? I need to go out and indulge my dress wearing a little bit more. And I need to, and that was a lot of, it's interesting how, like, the pressures that come from a book will cause you to sort of go like, wow, I don't think I've had that conversation with myself yet. I've been really busy
Yeah, yeah.
trying to live.
I mean, that tends to be the problem. I mean, I was discussing with another YouTuber friend of mine who did a video about the intersection of race and gender, and how
Mm,
like he, as a Black man, hadn't like had the time to really think about gender in any
mm,
point, because he's like, I have too much other shit that I'm dealing with in my life that I've never really sat down to like really analyze my gender. And he's a cis man too, and like
mm.
he's like cis dude, never really thought about it, and he's just like, but it's
How
like
did when did you know you were cis?
yeah, exactly. And so it was just an interesting conversation of that like how gender is sometimes taken to be invisible, and when do we bring it up and when do we question it, and how the conversation on like trans issues today like innately brings that up about like what the intersection of like gender and identity is, but society
So,
has so much like made it a non-conversation unless it's like
oh my God.
categorizing you. Sorry.
No, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's funny because that categorization and that pressure to sort of find your category can be really, really like, what if I'm not trans enough? Kind of because well, okay, well, when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
I was very queer, and because I didn't know any better, and I liked what I liked, which is everything.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
um I'm very game. But that pushed away friends.
Mhm.
And as boys sort of matured, they didn't want to hang out with me. And as girls matured, they also didn't want to hang out with me. And
Mhm.
so I sort of buried that part of myself really deeply.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like over the years you can hear in various ways me denying it.
Mm.
Like when I had a D&D game, I was like uncomfortable with the way that my fellow male players played poorly when they gender bent.
Mm.
And so I was like, no gender bending, which is
That
like wild when you think about me now. It's just like,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I mentioned that to one of my oldest and best friends, and he goes, oh yeah, you were really running from something.
No, yeah. I had something. I mean, that's a very typical reaction in a lot of ways. Like for me, I joined Boy Scouts and then I became an Eagle Scout. Like I was like, I'm gonna be
Mhm.
boy. I'm gonna win the boy award, like the
Me
boy
too.
boyest
Me too.
boy
I was
award.
like
Yeah,
curling my mustache and stuff, like
exactly,
trying to be a
exactly.
dandy so that I can at least indulge that part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I don't want dandyism. I'm just not a man.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to not to derail this conversation because it's
Oh, this is
wonderful,
great.
but I love that we just had like a 5-10 minute diatribe like on not at all to do with Star Trek, which is wonderful.
Fine.
That's
Sorry, Trek fans.
no, that's why I love Star Trek, because it make you like, let's talk about weird alien slug people and then we'll somehow talk about actual meaningful issues.
Yeah, as an
Um,
allegory for those
yeah,
meaningful issues.
exactly. um but yeah, just to bring us into the conversation a little bit, and then we can divert back too if we want to.
Yeah, sure.
But you said like you were the first like trans non-binary and or
Oh,
writer
but
for
right, but there's over 900 Star Trek books, so only the first out.
yeah, the first that we know of that
Right.
like we're like aware of, number one. And then number two, like hopefully you were talking about, like I mentioned this before we started recording, but I mean, number one, I want to read the Charlie Jane Anders Star Trek book.
Oh yes, Charlie, please write this.
Please
I
do.
don't I don't know Charlie Jane Anders really well, but
I would like to. I know that they were just on. Anita Sarkeesian has a Star Trek podcast
oh,
that I was also on, and
oh my
they
gosh.
they were just doing a discussion on the recent episode of Star Trek Discovery. So I was like, oh, this is the podcast I'm here for. Um, but
Wow, that's cool. That's
yeah, it's
very cool, by the way.
wonderful. But like, you're not stealing the pedestal from anybody. What you're doing is hopefully paving the way for many more trans and non-binary writers to like have a place and like envision what that looks like, because I feel like with so many like representational moments, like the first Trek writer or the first like we just recently, there was Hanali Culpepper was the first like Black woman to direct pilot of Star Trek. Like
Mm.
the hope is not that like, oh, we did it, we checked the box and we have the one person who did the thing.
Yes,
Who did
definitely
the thing.
not.
that it's like, oh, this creates space for more people to be in the room, not just one person to be in the room.
Well, and frankly, if any Star Trek author from the past came forward and was like, okay, because of you, I feel more comfortable, I'd be like, it was you. You were the first.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
You take it. Take it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care. This is awesome. I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go. We'll find some trans. I'm sure there has to be. Like, I mean, clearly there was like gay
There
writers.
must be. There's not a chance. Statistically speaking, it's just impossible. You'd have to roll so many negative dice
to
not get one trans person in that 900 novel list. I mean, maybe Shatner wrote like 400 of them or something. I don't know.
Shatner wrote. Okay, so this is, I was telling you before we were on
oh right, this
recording.
is like your thing.
I am like my weird niche is I'm the Star Trek novel person. He wrote 10. He wrote 10 Star Trek novels, and they're a fascinating deep dive into William Shatner's id, because he wrote 3 trilogies. The first trilogy is all about William Shatner being brought back to life in it, like Captain Kirk being brought back to life by the Borg, and he becomes like a giant Mary Sue. He's just, the whole novel is just him being like, I can take, like, Picard, sit the fuck down, I'll beat the Borg for you and I'll deal with it. Like that's the first novel, the trilogy. The second trilogy we learn that the entire galaxy was created to birth Kirk so that he could be in the right place at the right time to stop like this galaxy ending threat. Like we learned like all the preservers and all that stuff was like just there to give birth to Kirk. And then the third trilogy, I'm not even kidding, is his kid, because he has a kid in the series, becomes Space Jesus. And his kid like saves the entire galaxy because he's Space Jesus. So they're fascinating books.
It's a little weirder when you played the character, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But it's funny you talk about the Mary Sue thing. And of course we both know Mary Sue is not it's
I'm not vilifying.
Normally derisive.
Yeah.
But one of the things, like, I hate to just bring it to like a trilogy that I'm going to release, but one of the things that I found really empowering was I tried to write a character that I wish I was. And I tried to write a character who is safe in all the ways that I think would be cool. And that was massively empowering.
Yeah, I would bet.
And eventually that character's themselves, and it's no longer about what you want or what you would do, but like at the same time, like when you start from there, especially when you don't have that kind of space in the real world, it's huge. It's great. It's like creating a world for yourself. And I think that if you don't have one for you, that Mary Sue-ness is actually really important.
I think so too. Like people deride Mary Sue, and like there's this whole, which by the way, Mary Sue actually came out of Trek fandom. I don't know if you knew that.
I know it was originally a misogynist term referring to that nice person.
Yeah.
That fanfic.
Yeah, the poor fanfic. It's like I don't necessarily view like Mary Sue's as like an inherently bad thing. I think it's a tool like any other. Like you can write good, like in a way you could look at someone like Captain America as like a Mary Sue. Like he's a perfect dude who makes no mistakes, and like so like this supposed to be the perfect like cis boy, who I love. Like
He's definitely perfect.
I got my Captain America shield. So like there's nothing wrong with
that first one was a real moment for me.
Yeah. So like I don't think it's a bad thing, and I think like author insert and like person insert characters are like sometimes can be really helpful. Like Stephen King makes a living off of that sort of thing. And I think like for trans people to have that and be like, hey, trans people can like, we can be written in and like be really awesome badass characters who are wonderful, and like but also can like, we can be perfect, we can be badass, we can kick butt, but then we can also be flawed and failed human beings as well, which I think is also important to show.
I love 10 Low by Stark Holborn, because it's really great. It's a little bit Mad Maxy, but it's a space opera, so there's a little bit Mad Max, there's a little Cowboy Bebop, and there's a whole lot of really awesome sort of I don't know, it's a wild combination of things. But there's lots and lots and lots of non-binary and trans characters in there, but a lot of them are like background characters or goons. Like some of them are like hench people getting like shot in the background, and you're like, hey, somebody like me got shot.
Yeah, I want to be that dude. Can I be the expendable dude who's just like having fun, like, oh crap?
Oh my
Get
God.
him, boys.
What if I was normal enough to be like a faceless no one?
I
That'd be
love that.
incredible.
I want to make that movie where like it's just like the trans gang of just like a bunch of like trans people just like showing up, just like beating people up and killing people and just get to be the henchmen.
The one time that I almost got mugged
Oh
was
boy.
by a bunch of ladies who were obviously in drag, and
Mm,
they started chasing me. I've never been chased by a bunch of
jeez.
6 foot tall drag queens, but
I don't
there it was.
I don't mean to make light of that, but that's like a surreal image to have
It
had in
was,
my
it
brain.
was. And like again, coming to this in adulthood and like looking back on that memory, being like, I have new feelings all over the place right now. Like I feel like back then, if I'd known then what I know now, I might have gotten mugged because I would have stopped and been like, wait, let's be friends.
Let's talk. I need to talk right now. I have feelings that I need to express with all of you.
Like how did Alex die? Trying to have a focus group.
Trying to confront the drag queen mob. It's great. The drag queen mafia. Okay. Seriously, to actually bring it in, so I do want to actually talk to you about Star Trek. I swear. So like what so how did this novel come about? I should say. Like I think, did they reach out to you to ask
They
you to write
did.
this novel? And then like what was the reasoning behind that? And did they choose Dax, or like what was basically, let me know how the novel came to be.
Sure, sure. Well, my agent called me and after many years said the words that I'd been fearing, which is they want you to write for Star Trek.
Oh God.
And I was like, oh, there's so much Star Trek now.
Yeah.
And like I loved Star Trek as a child. I was a huge Star Trek fan. And like as an adult, like I became a fan of other things as well. And so like I wasn't current
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
anything except maybe Lower Decks.
Yeah. Which is the best one, to be fair.
It's very easy watching and they're 30 minutes at a time, just high joke density.
I
So
haven't done an hour-long video about why I love Lower Decks. It's fine. No big deal.
I hate the Packlids.
Oh, I love them, but in that like, oh, the adorable subversive way. But
anyway,
anyways, we can talk about that. But yes, going
yes,
back
and
to
I'm happy to talk about that. I don't know if on podcast with unformed thoughts is how I want to talk about it, but
well, there's we could talk about that in the sense that like I do. There is like a problematic view of them like as like making fun of people with mental health issues, which is also inherently in there as well too.
I thought that at any minute they were going to turn around and be like, well, because you underestimated them for speaking in that fashion, that you got duped. But that never happened. It was always like, no, we're hilarious and we're gonna put one over on these nice people.
Yeah.
I'm just like, come on. Come on. When every one of your jokes is they talk funny. Sorry.
No, don't apologize to me. That's fine. It's totally cool. Like that's the conversations that I want to have. Like let's talk about like the failure. This is why I like Star Trek, right? Because it's a messy franchise that like I always say this, like Star Trek is my favorite franchise ever, but I don't think it's a perfect franchise by any means. Because what I like about it is like where it fails and where it succeeds is like where we can have the conversation. We can say like these episodes are fuck ups, but like it's interesting where it fucked up. And like let's talk about that.
It's trying.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's trying. And I think that Lower Decks is really trying too. Like I love Lower Decks. I mean, like I don't mean to disparage it when I bring up the Packlids, but like I like to see how people react to that because, for me, it's a little bit of a personal issue. When I have people in my life who are dealing with speech impediments because of, various issues. And, and so, when you feel like Star Trek starts punching down, it's like, that's weird.
Yeah.
You guys do that?
Yeah, I think a part of it is with that show is that it's Lower Decks is trying its best to take these tropes and ideas of Star Trek and like subvert them, but there's an inherent problematic nature to them because like that problem with the Packlids was inherent in like the very first episode that they existed.
Right,
like,
they were created wrong.
Exactly. And so like the show Lower Decks is taking that and they wanted to subvert it in a way of being like, oh, like these aliens that were made fun of are actually the big threat of the show, but it's also not really subverting their characterization. It's characterizing their place in terms of like threat level, but not really their characterizations and like interrogating the inherent problem in their conception.
Right. They nailed one California class cruiser and now they're the worst thing ever to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and it's like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
You know, but again, man, I don't want to. I'm so sorry
No,
for
no. Do not apologize. This is the conversations that
you
I'm
brought me
here
here to
for.
talk about the book.
I feel like we're 20 minutes into this conversation. People know what they're in for at this point, so we're
Oh,
we're
definitely,
good. We're good to
definitely.
talk. I'll say this: we will talk about the book at some point. And I'm talking directly to the viewer. We will talk about the book at some point in here. But go buy it. It's a really great book. I loved it. I have a review up of it that should also be up at the time of this interview. And
Oh, nice.
surprise, I adore it. And you can hear my specific thoughts there. It's a great book. We'll talk about it more, but we're just going to talk Star Trek and trans crap too here. So there you go. Anyways, back to what you were saying.
Oh no, no. I think you know, look, they could pull it out for me if like at the end they were just like, it was a ruse. You're all ableist. You underestimated us.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, just like they could have pulled it out at any point, at any point. Like the Ferengi from the very first episode, where I was
Mhm.
like, man, they really didn't think. And I was like, oh wow, okay, this is awesome. You know, as a trick. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, so where do you want to go from here?
Well, let's just talk about the book. So they called you to do it. Why
Oh, right.
Dax? Like, did they choose Dax? Did you choose
They
Dax? And
did actually. And so I was like, I really wanted to write that, but that was the only thing I could think of.
mhm.
And then they were like, that's what we want you for. And
Yeah,
I was like, that, but that's 20 years old off the air. Are you sure?
yeah, yeah.
And they, you know, to their credit, they really wanted it. And you know, what's funny is as I was writing it, I heard more and more and more of my friends, unprompted. Nobody knew that I was working on it, going like, I'm rewatching DS9, and like it took off. It, you know, went really big on Netflix for a while, and
Mhm.
you know, and so I suddenly sort of saw what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to work uh, during the time of the show because one, I feel like there's a lot of material to know after the show. And I mean, I didn't want to do something that was going to mess with the
Yeah,
Coda
fair.
trilogy that everybody really loves. And,
Mhm.
you know, like, I felt really unqualified to touch that part. Whereas, like, on the show, I feel like I can sort of know everything, you know, as long as it happened on camera, I can.
I can kind of get an idea of like what's going on. I don't need to know the weird niche of like what happened in novel 17 out of the 20 books. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. Exactly. Like, those writers are all really nice to me and I don't want them to feel insulted. It's just,
Yeah,
you
yeah. Of
know, that's
course.
there's a lot to know. And so and and I don't, you know, I don't read a lot of tie-in novels in my spare time anymore. I used to just like that was like my thing. Like I
Mhm.
used to love them. In middle school, I actually really loved you want to talk about William Shatner's It? I loved Tech War as a kid.
I've never read. I own some of the books. I've never read them. Never
I
read them.
don't want to vouch for that. Do not take that as an endorsement of any kind.
Oh, one day when I like want to like psychoanalyze William Shatner, we'll do that.
I think that sounds great. You know, like I would be all about going back and being like, were these as you know, because they were for a middle schooler. You're like, they're so violent and sexual and like all these other things, you know. But like
He's working some
now,
stuff out.
yeah, he's working some stuff out for sure.
um, well, and that's actually getting back into like the novel. Like that's actually what I really appreciate about the book was, I feel like Deep Space Nine #1 has been getting like a much bigger reappreciation like in the past few years, as you mentioned. Like people are going back to being like, actually this was the best one, that everyone sort of forgot. And for me, it was always my like Enterprise is my favorite in terms of like, I think it's the weird, like it's just the show that I think epitomizes Star Trek in all of its like, it's atrocious and also great at the same time, and like encapsulate that in 4 seasons of just wonky weirdness. But Deep Space Nine, I think, like if I had to like just step back objectively, like Deep Space Nine is clearly, I think, the best Star Trek that there is, in my opinion.
Mm.
And I think the other thing too is what's interesting is like them reaching out to you as a non-binary, because there has been a sort of uh awareness by the franchise as a whole, I think in
Mhm.
reference to Star Trek Discovery and their characters that they brought in there, and then just in the recognition of the fandom being like there's a big queer fandom that exists around Star Trek, that Jessie, Dax, and the Trill specifically were meant a lot to the trans community. So I think it's
Mhm.
like really cool that they reached out to you to just like said like let's write about Dax and like bring that perspective into her character. Um
Definitely.
so
And it was nice because Ed Schlesinger, the editor in chief over there, he was really into the Alien book of mine, and so or the Cold Forge, and so that really helped as well. Because one of the things that I will say is, like, as a queer person, I love being out, and I'm out for other queer people,
mhm.
right? But I'm always afraid that somebody's gonna like grade on a curve or something and be like, "This is a queer book," and it's like, well, no. I mean, yes, it's a book that has a lot of stuff for queer people, and I didn't make it for the straights. You know, if,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, but at the same time, like, I want you to read it. I want it to be accessible. I want everybody to be able to read it and enjoy it. Even people who like really don't like me, I would
Yeah.
like them to read my books because I think my message is much more articulate as a story than as anything I could say.
No, I mean, I think that's perfect because like there's this like relegation of like queer media that I think has started to be exploded a little bit in recent years, where like
Mhm.
I was like, oh, queer media gets made for queer people, and it's sort of like this weird like offshoot that only gets made for queer people. When I really think like no, I feel like we should be exposing ourselves to a variety of authors and viewpoints and distinctions and recontextualizations of like things that we love. Like again, as much as I love Star Trek, it's a show and franchise that it was very much dominated by a certain type of viewpoint,
Mhm.
mostly like straight white cis dudes, and I love them, don't get me wrong. I love my Ronald D. Moores and Ira Stephen Bears, then they're wonderful like writers who I adore, but they were writers coming in and trying to articulate other perspectives, but not being part of them.
Mhm.
And so I feel like getting chances to like write tie-in fiction and being to say like this is something that a lot of like trans people and queer people saw in the character of Jadzia and saw in
Mhm.
Dax. And it's not, and it doesn't take away or destroy what was already there. It's just sort of saying like, here's another perspective on this that we can add to it and like, and excite people and, and interest everybody. Like, I feel like the problem that I always have that I always try to articulate is like, there's somewhat this vitriolic reaction when like trans or non-binary or other marginalized groups like write stories in like big franchises, and I'm like, why wouldn't you want that? Like have someone take the stories that you love and like give you a new perspective on it, because that's just cool. I've seen Star Wars written by the same people over and over again. Now let me see it written by someone else. Let me see someone else write it, because I want to hear a different
Oh,
perspective.
my heart goes out to whoever that trans person
Oh
is.
god, yeah, that's the whole other topic, but
Yeah, I know. It's weird when you feel like representation is asking someone to take one for the team.
yeah, yeah.
Like, hey, get up there. Don't worry, we can't afford to hire bodyguards for you.
I look at poor like Kelly Marie Tran or like Johnny Boyega and a bunch of other people like of marginalized
Right?
groups in there. That's like they had to deal with so much shit because like they do get tokenized. Like they're like, we're gonna have you be the one person in this franchise and you'll represent everything to everyone. You also get all the fucking shit, and we're not gonna think about protecting you because there's no one else here that recognizes what you're gonna experience.
Also,
Uh
we're gonna cut your storyline and make it really shitty.
yep, because the people in charge don't recognize like the interesting storyline that you have, like the stormtrooper.
Oh my
uh
gosh.
his
I'm
he
gonna
had the
make
most
sure you
interesting
never
story.
talk about this book.
It's fine, it's okay. um I loved his Johnny Boyega storyline in the Star Wars movies. The
Oh
new ones are
yeah.
like was the most interesting one, and they just failed him so hard because I don't think they recognized like what was there.
Yeah, when
um
he said that too, I was like, fair.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Totally fair. But getting back to it, so for the book, one of the things that I really, really loved about it, and we'll go mild spoilers, I guess, for the book,
Hmm.
is that the whole book is basically Jetsia goes back to Trill and has to deal with kind of a mystery surrounding the Trill Symbiote Commission.
Mhm.
And you deal with like a lot of different topics that I really enjoyed. I think probably the first one that I would love to touch upon is how you really interrogate the Trill Symbiote Commission, because we get like pieces of that in Deep Space Nine. We're like, this system is actually kind of shit, actually. But then you like really go after it in the book, and I think that you just show like the failures of bias in people at the top, and like how systems, like when you have people in these positions, that they
Oh
pass
yeah.
down these biases over generations, and that even gets more compounded when you have like symbiotes that remember generations of things.
Oh
So,
yeah. I mean, Curzon shows how extraordinarily biased he is in
mhm.
making these calls, to the point that his reputation follows him after death.
Yep.
Like that kid is like, "Oh my God, you're not gonna fail me, are you, Jadzia?" You know, like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and so I mean, we know for a fact that he makes bad calls,
Mm-hmm.
and that means that he passes his bad calls down to the next generation. And if he's only passing people who seem like him, then that generation also shares Curzon's awful values.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally an episode where I think it doesn't it isn't it made clear that like he failed Jadzia the first time because he was attracted to her?
Yeah, that's facets.
Yeah. And so
So
it's like,
he actually tries to leave an Odo's body in that episode. I don't know if you know that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you know it, but yeah, it was. Which also, by the way, that tells me that there's like a soul transfer happening here.
Mm-hmm.
That's not that's not like a psychic impression or something like that. If he's gonna leave an Odo's body,
Yeah, it's just like okay, I get that would always weird me out, because I guess like, oh, I guess you can live in it. I don't know if you watch Star Trek Discovery, but like there was this whole mild spoilers for that show, but there's a Trill character who's like a weird ghost inside of another Trill character, and I saw people
Mhm.
complaining, it's like that's not sciencey. I'm like, do you not remember like
Yeah, the
the
Trill have
weird
all kinds of weird magic shit.
yeah. It's just like strange stuff going on all the time with that. Like it's fine with me. I love Star
Yeah,
Trek, but
I got to invent a
hard
new
sci-fi is
ritual.
not. Yeah.
That was one of my favorite things.
I love that too. Yeah. Can you talk about that? Actually, like getting to like think about some of those like rituals for the Trill. And
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, you can't go too far afield, because when they're developing the show, if you cross the show, then it's
mm,
not great. And right at the time that I was writing this was around the time that Discovery was gonna air the Trill episodes.
mhm.
And so when I was like, "Well, can you tell me what you're gonna do?" And they were like, "No, no."
Yeah. It's like,
But
no, no, no. Come on.
you
No,
write
no.
novels. Are you kidding?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not that important. Come on.
That is the hierarchy, by the
Mm,
way.
mhm.
It's like screenwriter, novelist.
That's always how it goes. It's like your canon, and what is the rule that I say? Your canon until proven otherwise
Oh yes,
is the rule for novels. Yeah.
and I try to make sure that my novels like stay canon as long as possible by
Mm-hmm.
trying to predict what they're gonna do, and
Mm-hmm.
and like just try and steer clear of it. But it was awesome because, honestly, as I was looking through the series, we really only have like the Rite of Emergence and the Jantara,
Mm-hmm.
and not much else. And there's a lot to work with there, and they make reference to there being all these other rituals and things like that. So I felt like it really needed some padding out. And so I relied on a trope that like was another movie that was a real queer awakening for me, Strange Days.
Oh, fun one. Fun one.
You have the black tapes or the black whatever, whereas like if somebody dies at the end of the memory playback. Okay, Strange Days. You can record your memories and play them back into other people. There's a murder mystery around it. The end. Okay, it's really fun though if you like James Cameron movies and
I've
you're
seen it, but
as old as
it's
I
been a
am.
long, long time. So I saw it way,
It
way back
has
as a kid. Yeah.
Tom Sizemore and Juliette Lewis and is Ray Fiennes, I think.
I think so.
Anyway,
Sounds about right. Yeah.
uh, yeah, the Mordnock kind of comes from that. Like that idea of like going back and reliving that last second. Um, and I think in part because Strange Days is about living other people's memories. And so there's one point, and I think I referenced this on another recent interview, where there's a lawyer and a guy's dealing in memories like they're drugs, you
Hmm.
know. And so he has dealt him this lesbian fantasy, and the lawyer like comes out of the memory like very you know, and he seems obviously titillated but also strangely awakened.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I
Right,
got
like
so
that guy learned
someone.
something about himself just then.
It's like, oh shit, oh no, I didn't need to deal with this today.
You're right, like this is going to make everything so complicated.
Yep,
I,
yep.
I will say that was the first thing I thought when somebody said something about like really defined what genderqueer meant.
Mm.
And I was like, oh no.
That's a better one than mine. My queer awakening in pop culture, besides Jessie, which was like the
Yeah.
first time I could articulate. Like Jessie gave me the words to articulate what I was feeling. But the
Yeah.
first time like I like was able to like, oh, I get that feeling. It's the strangest one. Scooby-Doo, the first live action Scooby-Doo movie, because there's the
Okay.
scene where they all switch bodies in that they like switch
Oh
souls.
yeah.
And so
Okay.
like
I
Fred
haven't
ends
seen
up,
the movie, but I can see where you're going with
yeah,
this.
there's like one point where they all switch bodies, and it's also where I learned about sex because like Fred ends up in Daphne's body, and he's like in Daphne's body at one point, and I'm like, oh, I feel that. I wish I was Fred in Daphne's body, just not to like be sexy, but just like, oh, I'm in a girl's body now, and I want that
Just
experience.
hang out, walk around.
And then he also said at the same time, is like, oh, now I can look at myself naked. And I'm like, why would you want to look at yourself naked? What is that? Oh, sex. And then that's how I learned about both gender and sex at the same time from Scooby-Doo. So yours is better than mine. Let me put it that way.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's true. I had a nice calm discussion in my mid to late 20s and you know, it really helped out.
Yeah.
I uh, so so yeah, there's a lot of trill esoterica that I think is hinted exists but didn't really.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really wanted to play with that and play in that area. And it's really interesting to have sort of a lot of leeway and no leeway, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like I can invent the Inlatix reflecting pool in front of the Trill Symbiosis Commission because there was a Matt still and that thing has a name probably,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. But at the same time, if I start running off into the countryside and coming up with, you know, new animals or something like that, they're gonna be like, no,
Yeah. Stop.
you know.
Stop that. Yeah. Yeah.
I accidentally one of the first outline rejections that we got was because I had a Starfleet rain slicker,
Oh. Oh,
and I
what?
was like, "What do they wear in the rain?"
That's
You know?
amazing. I want that. Why didn't they? Well, to see now, I want that in the show. I want
Well,
that
and it
cosplay.
was I touched a taboo area, which is playing with uniforms.
Really?
Yeah,
Awesome.
uniforms are an extension of the brand. They're very much an extension of the brand. So I don't know exactly if that's what it was, but I mean, it seriously came back. It was like, if you've never seen that as a uniform, you may not use it.
That's fascinating. I mean, I could get that because they probably sell so many cosplay and like uniform merch because they come out with a new cosplay every single season at this point. Um,
Well, the
but
other thing
yeah, it's
is, if I
fascinating.
create a rain slicker that's official issue, that means that's sort of, doesn't that mean it's in every Starfleet data bank? Doesn't that mean all of them should start getting it? You know?
Yeah, it's like why haven't they been using that before? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
now, if you wonder why your favorite ensign is just wet all the time, they don't have rain slickers.
It's wonderful. Um, one of the things that I really loved, speaking of like playing within like established stuff, is like you start to interrogate Duran,
Oh yes.
and bring his character. So for the audience, Duran is the serial killer murderer character that appears in Crossfire, which is I love that episode, and a few other episodes as
I
well.
think it's Field of Fire.
Field of Fire.
I hate to be that person,
Oh
but I
no,
think
you're
it's
fine.
Field
You're
of
fine.
Fire.
You're right. I Crossfire feels like a better name for it, but Field of Fire, you are correct.
You'll get
Uh,
caught up in the.
yeah, someone I'm canceled now because of that.
Oh
But
no, no,
no,
no.
no, you're good. But no, that that uh that character was always just seen as like, oh, he's crazy and gonna just murder everybody. Um,
Right.
uh, and you
That's
in
really frustrating for me, by the way,
well, how come? I
because okay, so I feel so there are a couple of things. One, I feel like there's nothing worse for mental health care than our attitude
mm,
towards mental health care.
yes, yes.
And given that I have this strong feeling, you know, I wrote this book, Alien the Cold Forge, which stars a heartless corporate auditor and a dying, you know, queer woman of color. And
Mhm.
together they get at each other's throats until it gets really bad, and then the aliens get out and everybody wants to kill each other, right? And that's but people would write in on a regular basis and they'd say, wow, Dorian's such a compelling psychopath.
Mm.
And the problem that I have with that is that that is a poor understanding of what psychopathy would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, those people are also likely to be victims of crimes,
Yeah.
not just perpetrators. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and if you take the whole stat, mentally ill people are far more likely to be
I
the
was just
victims
to
of
say they're actually
crime
way more likely to
than
be.
the
Yeah.
perpetrators of crimes. And so here I have this chip on my shoulder for this book that I wrote that I was like, no, he just embodies corporate values. He's just very good at his job. Like, the concept for him was, what if Burke was good at his job? That was it. That was the whole concept.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, wow, it's terrifying. This guy's horrible. But I think that he really is sort of a key Wayland Yutani employee. He seems like a really great guy for them.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
He's doing good work. I mean
yeah, yeah. I'm
that's what
sure
that
he drives the
whole
stock up.
I mean, that's what the whole franchise of Alien is kind of about, like corporatism run amok, right? And like the failures
Right.
for them to actually address real issues because they're like, oh, we can profit off of the weird alien monster thing.
So so here I have this chip on my shoulder and I go into research Star Trek and I'm like, I'm hitting the punch list of all the best Gen Z episodes. And here comes Duran like with his psychosexual Hannibal Lecter bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, your only excuse for why he does things is that he's crazy. That's
Yeah.
it. You don't have anything else here.
Yeah.
And you know, I really despise that.
Yeah.
I think that you know, but let's look at the episode. And like, I hate to be like this, but let's look at the episode where that comes from, which is, I think, Equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the beginning of the episode, Jedzia is having trouble controlling her temper, and she has trouble controlling her temper in like the most ridiculous ways. Like Benjamin starts to win a chess game and she's like, you cheated, and like hits the chessboard. Like somebody else tries to talk to her while she's like trying to play piano and she's like, shut up.
Mm-hmm.
um and I feel like those are characterizations, and I think that the Duran characterization was consistently lazy.
Mm-hmm. Especially in they when they do the episode Field of Fire and he's sort of brought up as like, oh, he's gonna help you learn how to find a killer. And there's never really an interrogation, especially by Esri, who is a mental health counselor. Like, her whole job is to like
Kind
deconstruct
of
people. And
fooled
she's
me on
like,
that one.
can't help this guy. He's just crazy out there.
He's
And
just a jerk. I hate him.
yeah, yeah. Which is just funny considering that, like, I feel like she would have, like, she gives empathy to Garrick, who is like, we know is like at least implied to be like have done some terrible Nazi horrible stuff. And
hmm
she gives empathy to him, but not
Well, I
to
mean,
the
they
mental
do
health.
work on a former work camp turned gas station.
Yeah, that is true. Very true. Very true.
Whenever Kara's in her room and Tarek Nor, do you think she's like, this is kind of dismal, actually. I don't think I want to live here.
Yeah, it's like this room probably housed a bunch of like this is not great. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, and then it's like, yeah, that's where we put the Replimat,
Yeah.
you know?
I never really thought about it that way, but it is true. It's like, oh, let's just like hang out and like
Kira
have,
has an icy spine, an icier spine than everybody thinks. If she
yeah.
works there and lives there, like, that's something they don't really talk about, but like, I think bears some mention. She's terrifying.
It is true because they do have the flashback episodes where you see what it was like on Tarek Nor, and it's like the place was essentially like I don't want to be too dark, but like it's kind of like Auschwitz sort of thing. Like that's sort of happened there. It's like really
It's
horrible.
definitely meant to be inspired by a concentration camp. You can
Yeah,
tell what the writers are going for. Um, and
yeah.
so for them to sort of bring that in very late in the, not late in the game, but you kind of your season 2, season 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then, but people don't feel like they live there. Now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I think is kind of cool though is that has clearly been on their minds because of how much they want to have the Bajoran spirituality as a major feature. When they, when you watch the documentary,
Mm-hmm.
they immediately go into Bajoran spirituality.
Yeah.
and Tarek Nor has now become a temple. And so I do like that idea that like a holy seat of Bajoranism sort of takes over Tarek Nor
And like the
and
reclaiming,
turns
that sort of thing. Yeah.
right, it turns it into this holy space. And that's really interesting. And like we kicked out the tailor and the in the Klingon deli, and now it's a temple,
Hmm.
and I think that is really interesting and sort of a profound way to deal with some kind of spiritual trauma.
Yeah.
Um, so that sounds like something that another person might write.
Yeah, yeah, no, that'd be fascinating. To go back to the novel again, just 'cause we've been talking for an hour and barely touched on it, but I did really like going back to Duran. You could sort of give an explanation for his
Mhm.
murder. Like you actually explain where his murder came from, why he killed somebody, and it's actually him having a profound fear of losing his own sense of identity
Yes.
in inside of a DAC symbiote, which was really cool and like not something that I really thought about, because everyone in Trill Society just seems to be really excited to get a symbiote in them. Like, take my personality away from me, and like let's
Right.
join this communal thing. Which totally get down for myself personally, but like you never really think about like that fear of individualism, because Star Trek is such a franchise about
Right.
collectivism and collective identity, that to have someone who has that profound fear is sort of an interesting sort of breakdown of that idea. I think that was really, really cool in the novel to see.
Thank you. Well, I think that, anything measured will be optimized. And
Hmm.
since we use this as this measuring stick for their society, when they're like, "Oh, you're joined," that's like saying like I'm an astronaut to them,
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, I go up to the moon all the time. Me and the moon are best friends," like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Wow, holy crap. That's amazing." And so they see it as this like highest good. And then it pushes people who are weak to pursue it.
yeah. Hmm.
Nemi and Duran are both not joining material, and I try to make that really clear.
Hmm.
Um, and they both come at it really hard
Hmm.
because of the pressures of the life around them. I sort of hint that Duran and his dad don't like each other and have always had problems.
Hmm.
And if you look at, if you look at like President Trump and how hard he tries to earn his dad's approval
Yeah.
while that guy is dead, you know,
Yeah.
it's really sad. But at the same time, it's like you can see this hateful relationship between them has turned into Duran's like, I'm gonna get revenge by becoming an astronaut.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting to like see how that like passes down, and people don't actually like interrogate what they're, I mean, it goes into that whole thing of like there's this bias in society that says like you should want this thing, without actually letting people interrogate like what do they actually want. And it sort of pushes them, and you bring up Nemi, the character who is these, just for, again for the audience, the sort of character that this murder mystery that you centered the whole story on sort of revolves around. um just it's how she was sort of pressured into this and by Jadzia, actually, at one point in the novel, where like Jadzia is like, oh, like, I want you want to do this, I'll give you my recommendation, but you better live up to my recommendation.
Right, you
Which
better
is really,
perform.
yeah, which is profoundly messed up for her to have done. And that's another thing in the novel too, that I you don't idealize Jadzia in any way. Like, she makes mistakes throughout the
Mhm.
book, both in the past and in the present, that I thought was just really great to see, because it's often like when we do these sort of like tie-in novels, we tend to heroicize these characters that we've fallen in love with.
Oh my
And
gosh, yes.
mhm.
I really who taught me this was I hate to be this person again,
Oh,
Firefly.
oh God, fire! Oh, we could talk a
So
hell about Firefly.
Jane was never bad in a way that seemed to matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote an essay on this a long time ago because like there were things that I really loved about that show and there were things I really hated about that show. And I couldn't stop taking it apart, much like the like every Star Wars movie, like there are things I really love about them and there are things I really hate about them. I can't stop taking them apart. And when I write books, I mean, it's nice to be able to say like, I love this thing and I wanted it to be different and
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna like tinker with it until I can sort of alter the code a bit and add something that I think needs to be a part of this tapestry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying don't do your plot. I'm saying like we should have talked about it more.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so with Firefly, I mean, like I said, Jane was always sort of, he always had a charming one-liner. He was always nice in the right time. And, I don't think characters can be good characters unless you disagree with them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know that Janzia is as close to perfect as a person can be. Okay. But at the same time, she must make mistakes on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis. And those mistakes come from blind spots that she has inherited in some cases, which that's something for you here, white people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
maybe you have inherited some blind spots.
Maybe.
Just a
It's like it's the problem that we have is like no one today. I don't want to say no one because that's overgeneralizing, but I feel like a lot of the anger and vitriol we see online in a lot of these spaces when we talk about interrogating fandoms, interrogating franchises and stories that have existed for a long time, a lot of the frustration is people tend to like look back and say it's like this is perfect. Star Trek: The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, they were perfect shows of deep,
right.
and like they made no mistakes. And because of that, there's no sense of introspection on how we can improve or do better or make ourselves better. And that's why I constantly like to be like, let's talk about these failures. And it's again why I like Trek, because Trek is a franchise that invites that introspection. It's more than like Star Wars or other franchises. It's like this show has fucked up over time, and let's talk
Right.
about where it fucked up. And I think
Meridian.
that's great. Meridian is on every level. Meridian is horrible.
Yeah, it's not even like good like Our Man Bashir is good. Like Our Man Bashir is like drinking game good.
Yeah, which also you have a great joke. You have the honey
Yeah,
the
he
honey
reads it
bear.
for the articles.
Yeah. You have Bashir, and the thing is like Jessie makes fun of his James Bond cosplay, and is like, oh, the honey bear character, that's problematic. It's like, no, it's fine. She's really deep, I swear.
It's postmodernist.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Oh
Absolutely
yes.
wonderful. Yeah, no, it's it's interesting you say that about Jane too in Firefly. I mean, there needs to be a good critical reevaluation of Firefly as well, especially in the light of like stuff with
Oh
Joss
my
Whedon
God.
too.
There are so many. I wouldn't even want to dip my toe into that pool. It is quite full of
Mm-hmm.
bathers.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's like that show is perfect, and everybody's like, no. There's problems here.
well, and I think that I actually think that there is a really good critical response to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it really does get under people's skin though, and look, I think I loved Cowboy Bebop more than any other show. I'm talking about the anime, the TV
Mm-hmm.
show. I liked parts of it. I didn't like parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot older now, and I've seen a lot more stuff. So I've already seen a bunch of that stuff before. So maybe it's not going to hit me as hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not going to judge them. They made a show during a pandemic that had a lot of heart.
Yeah.
You know.
I have actually not seen the original anime. I need to. I believe me,
Well,
people have told
great.
me.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Actually, like I think you watched it in the right order.
Yeah, I watched the
You know,
TV show first, and then I'm planning on watching the anime. So.
yeah, now you can go back. But one of my friends a long time ago pointed out something really problematic in
Mm-hmm.
the anime. And this was long before the Netflix show was even a thought on somebody's brain,
Mm-hmm.
and I jumped in and I was like, no, that, and I pointed to something that was worse, and I was like, you didn't have a problem with that. And then it dawned on me like, wait, I'm arguing this person's point for him.
Yeah.
I was like, and I love Cowboy Bebop. I love it. I still love it. I love Lower Decks. I still love it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look at the Packlet jokes and I'm gonna be like, that's really asinine.
Yeah.
I know people, you're hurting with those.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but at the same time, like, do I think it's hilarious? Not the Packlet jokes, but everything else, yes.
And that's the other thing too, is people tend to think like, oh, when we criticize something, we're saying that we hate it and that it's the worst thing ever and that we don't want to watch it. It's like, no, there's problematic stuff, but I still
I'm just
love
saying
this
that I
thing.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't criticize it if I didn't love it.
Yeah.
You know how much I talk about Harry Potter?
Mm-hmm.
I used to talk about it all the time.
Yeah. No,
But I don't love it anymore, so I don't criticize it anymore. I just don't care.
Exactly. It's like that's one of the hardest things with that franchise is like because of what J.K. Rowling has made that into is like I wish I could go in and be like, let's talk about all the because there's stuff in that franchise is like we could deconstruct that and talk
Yeah.
about it.
But
And
just
if
like
I
Chick-fil-A, I ain't buying from somebody who personally hates me.
exactly,
Like
exactly.
all my ally friends or whatever, you guys go and enjoy it.
Hmm.
But just recognize that I won't be joining you.
Yeah.
And and yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where like I love Death of the Artist and all that. I'm way into if you want to read my book with no interpretation or context, that sounds really cool. I wonder what you're going to come up with, you know, but at the same time, sometimes an author will like won't let you evade their message,
Hmm.
and she was like, I'm going to make myself the foremost authority on trans issues.
Hmm.
Okay, well then we're going to point out how qualified you are to be in that position.
If you're going to continually put yourself in this discussion, then you're going to have to take the criticism with it, and you can't just distance yourself from it.
Yeah,
And she just
I'm just
wants to,
saying you shouldn't exist. Why are you so mad?
yeah. Oh no, it's fine. Like I just like I'm just defending women. It's like no, you're attacking trans people because TERFs are dogmatic hate group against trans people and masquerading as a form of feminism that doesn't actually exist. Anyways, I have many thoughts on that.
Oh, I'm sure we all agree on it here. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. But yeah, no, going back to Trek. It's just a franchise that I think like I see efforts being made to like critically reappraise and reclaim different things, like with the Trill, with like this novel, like them asking you to do this and you writing it, different things being like this is a problem, while also
It's not a
perpetuating.
rose-colored love letter.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and but it also like we're perpetuating new problems too, like with the Packlets and like things like that
mm,
that I'm sure like we're discussing now, you and I'm sure
mhm.
there are discussions happening. Hopefully people in the writers room of that show are also discussing it. But like I'm sure 10-15 years down the line, the franchise will continue and that'll get critically reappraised at some point
Yeah,
and
I would
discussed.
imagine so.
Yeah, and I would hope so.
And oh, actually, getting back to the genesis of this novel,
Mm-hmm.
it was when I was watching Equilibrium, the Duran storyline, because they go to Trill, they do the Symbiosis Commission, which gave me all of like it's one of the two times they go to Trill in that show. um and so um at the end of the episode, Cisco and Bashir solve the mystery while
Mm-hmm.
Jadzia is totally unconscious for like the last half of the episode, or maybe the last third of the episode. She's not really a party to her own story.
And she doesn't have agency in her own like mystery.
Right. You brought up Anita Sarkeesian. I think I must have seen all of her women versus tropes
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. And so that really, I mean, that struck me as really disempowering to that character and not a particularly interesting way to approach the story.
Mm-hmm.
When I am writing a scene, I'm always thinking, which POV character could I choose that would have the greatest emotional impact? Now in this book, I only had one, so there you go. But like having somebody experience like a wedding from the sidelines, for example, seems like a weird flex as a writer. you
Yeah.
know and so it's like, well, the person who cares the most is unconscious and the other two people are going to do the job, I guess. And then how do they solve the problem? Threats and intimidation.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm just like, again, what kind of diplomat are you supposed to be? Oh, the diplomat's unconscious. Like it's such a typically sort of toxically masculine way to deal with that situation
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to make sure had ramifications for Jadzia in this book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her captain did that, and he pulled that big, fun, oh, I'm the captain, and now everybody hates her, and she can't get any help.
Mm-hmm.
Is he there holding the back? No, he's on
Trickles
Deep
down.
Space Nine. Like, you've got a week.
Yeah, and he still complicates the story. I do also like he's not a villain in the piece, but he is
No,
like an
no, he's actually
antagonizing.
quite nice.
Yeah, but well, he is a sort of like he has reasonable understanding. He's like, half my bridge crew is gone. I need y'all back here. But like, he
Right,
is
it's
sort
the
of like
Dominion
an
War's about to start. You guys, like, get over here.
please. But he is sort of like a pressuring force and like an
Mhm.
antagonistic force
He
to
creates a
Jedzia.
timer for sure.
Exactly. So I actually kind of enjoyed that sort of look at it, and it is a really good analysis of that, and like how Jedzia is constantly placed in like having to deal with the ramifications of others' decisions, but she has to bear like the responsibility of it, even though like a lot of it wasn't. She does have stuff that she does and makes mistakes herself, but she also has to bear the responsibility of like Curzon's mistakes
Oh yes.
and Cisco's mistakes and the symbiote commission's mistakes.
It was also really nice to kind of come up with a way to say, like, Duran, if you hadn't murdered those people, this book wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
you know, my one of my favorite parts is when she comes out of it and she goes, okay, Duran had a good reason for doing all this, and Kira goes, oh, so he wasn't evil, and she's like, oh no, no, he's yeah, no.
He's still not quite. Yeah, it was wonderful.
He was a nasty, nasty person, but like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have been talking for an hour, and I've loved this conversation. This has been absolutely wonderful. It didn't go the direction I wanted. I intended, not wanted, intended, but like I
Oh
loved
my
it.
gosh, take it anywhere you want.
No, it's great. But I just want to just to wrap this out. Is there anything that you want to mention that we didn't touch upon that you want to say before and hawk your wares for future books and things like that before we
Oh
wrap
sure.
out? Yeah.
Well, in July, August Kitco and the Mechas from Space comes out. It is about August Kitco, a lovely, sweet, and calm jazz pianist, and Ardent Violet, a fiery, passionate pop star, non-binary, of course.
Oh yeah.
Um, and their whirlwind romance, while Mechas from Space try to kill everyone.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds absolutely freaking wonderful.
It's book one in the Star Metal Symphony, so there will be 3 books, and I'm really, really excited about it. This is, my editor sort of described it as this is like if David Bowie wrote a space opera.
I feel like Dave Bowie basically is a space opera into
I
himself.
know, like that's, oh my gosh, I was like, well, that's exactly what I wish. So,
Well, I'm very excited about that. I will definitely be picking that up. And to wrap out for me on my end, like I said earlier to everyone in the audience, I love this book. It was wonderful. Like I said, I listened to the audiobook, but then I picked
mm,
up a copy just so I could have a copy on my shelf.
it was a
Um,
great read.
yeah, it was a really, really good book. You did a
I mean,
fantastic
the
job.
audiobook was well read. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
didn't mean to be like, the book was a great read. Like, I hope you think that. I don't feel like I get to
oh, it
say that
was. It
for you.
was. No, it
The
was.
audiobook narrator did a great job reading.
Robert Petkoff is I listened to all of his. He does really good audio work. But yeah, no, he was really, really good. But yeah, no, I love this novel. You did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for writing it, and thank you so much for joining me on this. Please pick it up, people in the audience. Also, something to tell you,
Mm,
just to make you feel good. So I usually go out to my bookstore and pick up the Star Trek novels, and they're usually up. Every single one is on the shelf. Yours
mhm.
is the only one I asked, and they're like, we sold out, and we ordered new ones because other people were looking for it. So
That's awesome.
your book's doing, at least in my area, your book's doing well with the nerds. So
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, I went and I signed a couple at all of my local bookstores. And if you do feel like supporting independent bookstores, you can
mhm.
look up Read It Again Books in Sewanee, Georgia, where I will, if you call them and say, I want an autographed copy, they can get you one, or I can go into the bookshop and sign one for you if you
Hell
need.
yeah.
So birthdays and anniversaries and all that stuff, and I don't charge for that. It's better than Amazon,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, much, much, much better than Amazon. Please support local bookstores, and actually send me. We'll message each other after we're done here. But please send me that link
Great.
because I'll put it. If audience, it should be down in the down below now. So check that out if you want to get an autographed copy.
I
So
must have signed 100 Revenants for them,
yeah,
and so they're just shipping them out to everybody. So anybody who wants a signature, that's the easiest way to get one.
perfect. Then yes, go check that out. Should be down below at this point. Thank you again, Alex. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, I will have you back at some
No,
point in
feel
the near
free.
future, and I would love to talk more. So thank you so much.
Thank you.